Hi Jane, this is Mohammed Moafak, and today I will be discussing the topic that I have chosen, which is the early childhood pre-operational stage by Jean Piaget. The pre-operational stage is the second stage in Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Characteristics of the pre-operational stage. The pre-operational stage occurs roughly between the ages 2 and 7. Language development is one of the hallmarks of this period. Piaget noted that children in this stage do not yet understand concrete logic, and they cannot mentally manipulate information, and they are unable to take the point of view of other people, which he termed egocentrism. During the pre-operational stage, children also became increasingly adept at using symbols as evidenced by the increase in playing and pretending. For example, a child is able to use an object to represent something else, such as pretending a broom is a horse. Role-playing also became important during the pre-operational stage. Children often play the roles of mommy, daddy, doctor, and many other characters in their life. Egocentrism. Piaget used a number of creative and clever techniques to study the mental abilities of children. One of the most famous techniques to demonstrate egocentrism involved using a three-dimensional display of a mountain scene, often referred to as the three-mountain task. Children are asked to choose a picture that showed the scene they had observed. Most children are able to do this with little difficulty. Next, children are asked to select a picture showing what someone else would have observed when looking at the mountain from a different viewpoint. Invariably, children almost always choose a scene showing their own view of the mountain scene. According to Piaget, children experience this difficulty because they are unable to take on another person's perspective. Now we will be discussing conservation. This is another well-known experiment. It involves demonstrating a child's understanding of conservation. In one conservation experiment, equal amounts of liquid are poured into two identical containers. The liquid in one container is then poured into a different shaped cup, such as a tall and thin cup or a short and wide cup. Children are then asked which cup holds the most liquid. Despite seeing the liquid amounts were both equal, the children almost always choose the cup that appears fuller. Piaget conducted a number of similar experiments on conservation of numbers, length, mass, weight, volume, and quantity. He found that few children showed any understanding of conservation prior to the age of 5. Piaget's thoughts on the pre-operational stage. As you might have noticed, much of Piaget's focus at this stage of development focused on what children could not yet do. The concept of egocentrism and conservation are both centered on abilities that children have not yet developed. They lack the understanding that things look different to other people and that objects can change in appearance while still maintaining the same properties. However, not everyone agrees with Piaget's assessment of children's abilities. Researcher Martin Hughes, for example, argued that the reason that children failed at the three-mountain task was simply because they did not understand it. In an experiment that involved utilizing dolls, Hughes demonstrated that children as young as the age of 4 were able to understand situations from multiple points of view, suggesting that children became less egocentric at an earlier age than Piaget believed. Now I will be discussing why I chose this topic. The reason why I chose this topic was because it had a lot of interesting information. In high school, I have taken a psychology course that spoke highly of Jean Piaget. My teacher at that time admired his work, so I decided to take on the responsibility to explain Piaget's work in high school as well as in college. While reading Jean Piaget's childhood pre-operational stage, I had the ability to recall old childhood memories, such as imaginary friends and me being physical and conducting violent play. Because of these two things, I have obtained certain attributes that are beneficial and some that are not. I used to believe that if I was to close my eyes, I would disappear. Now, who can relate to this topic? The people who can relate to this topic are those that work with children. The reason why is because at this stage, the child has not yet completely understood certain concepts, such as seeing in other people's perspective, the difference in quantity, volume, mass, and they are still improving on everyday life skills. such as the child's language is beginning to develop more. They begin to interact either aggressively or they become quiet and create an attachment with an imaginary friend. Almost 65% of children have imaginary friends. The people that can relate to this topic are those who work with children ages 2 till 7. Child and youth agencies, kindergarten classes, and preschool are some of the few places that Jean Piaget's work can be very useful. By learning this stage in development, they can appropriately act with the children to help them improve socially, mentally, and physically. Now, why is this information important? Jean Piaget has 4 stages. The sensory motor stage. During this stage, infants and toddlers acquire knowledge through sensory experiences and manipulating objects. The second stage, the pre-operational stage. At this stage, kids learn through pretend play, but still struggle with logic and taking the point of view of other people. The third stage, the concrete operational stage. Kids at this point of development begin to think more logically, but their thinking can also become very rigid. They tend to struggle with abstract and hypothetical concepts. And for the last one, the formal operation stage, the final stage of Piaget's theory, involves an increase in logic, the ability to use deductive reasoning, and an understanding of abstract ideas. These stages also act as a milestone. The facts are based on real-life tests, research, and critical thinking. This is why the information presented is important to people who have children, who work with children, or people who will be in the future. Now, things that you guys should remember about this topic. Information that should be remembered is that the children at this stage are still progressively improving mentally. Jean Piaget's egocentrism, or the mountain test, displays that children have difficulty of seeing things in other people's perspective. But Martin Hughes argued against Jean Piaget's test because he believed that the egocentrism, the mountain test, was simply not understood by the child. It had nothing to do with perspective. Another important test that we should remember is the conservation test. Children at this time do not understand the concept of volume, mass, weight, and quantity. Conservation is the idea that an object can change shape but remain the same. We now have a video in the link below that demonstrates conservation. And I will briefly tell you guys about conservation again. The video I use as my resource explains everything, such as conservation, egocentrism, and many other things. The reason why I chose this video is because it shows everything visually and you'll understand a lot more. And they also show the tests and everything, so you can get a firm grasp of all the information that Jean Piaget is trying to present. This video will be very useful to anybody that wants to have an insight on Jean Piaget's pre-operational stage. And for those who will be working at anything related to child or children, so this video can help you a lot. Thank you so much.